Hello, and welcome to our series on inspiring leadership and how you can become a more inspiring leader. I'm going to be talking about this compass, the Inspiring Leadership Compass, which forms part of the series. And I just want to explain overall about it before I go into MQ, the top one there. We did the research into this and found that the two areas that people know the most about, IQ, accounts for just 6% of your performance and potential. And then the later fad that came on, the later craze, was about EQ. And everybody realized that emotional intelligence was very important. But that only accounts for 30% of your success in your performance and your potential in life and in work. So what's the missing 64%? And that was the other elements of the compass and the research that we did, which we wrote the books on: Inspiring Leadership, Inspiring Women Leaders, Top Tips for Inspiring Leaders, Top Tips for Inspiring Women Leaders, and the psychometrics, the Inspiring Leadership psychometric and the IL 360, where others give you feedback. So as you go around the compass, you can see MQ, that moral component, moral quotient, the Q being quotient, your integrity, your values, your ethics, your behavior, your character. Going around it, PQ, what gives your life meaning and purpose, and how do you create a sense of mission and a vision for people in the future? HQ, your health, your well-being, your wellness, your mental and your physical health, not included in many of the leadership models and research, but as we know these days, it's crucial. Then IQ, and that's not just about passing an IQ test, it's about your decision-making. It's about the people you call into your life to help you make the best decisions, your mentors, your coaches. EQ, the emotional and social intelligence, and how you manage yourself, manage others and the situation. RQ, your resilience, your coping with adversity, setbacks and disappointments. BQ, your brand, your reputation, your image and your impact. And then finally, you've got LQ, your legacy. That's the outer 8 principles of inspiring leadership. And as you can see on the inner wheel, what about yourself? What are you doing to develop yourself? How much attention are you giving that? Then your relationships, your organization, and finally, what are you putting back into society? So that's a quick trip around the compass. Let's look at the top where the needle is pointing. The true north is pointing to MQ, moral quotient. And this is how you use your values, your beliefs, the principles you live your life by, both at work and in the ethics that you use, both in your life and in your work. So I find a very useful metaphor is the one about the two wolves. It comes from the tribal Indians in America, where bringing up a small child, the old chieftain said to the child, "You have two wolves inside you who are constantly fighting for victory over you. One wolf is the wolf of jealousy, of greed, of selfishness, of avarice. And the other wolf is the good wolf, the wolf who's kind and thoughtful and generous and shares." And the small child says, and which wolf wins? And the reply was, the one you feed, the one you feed. So how are you feeding your two wolves inside you, which will affect your moral integrity, your values, your belief, whether people trust you, whether you create psychological safety in the workplace? How are you spending your time? Are you being led astray by certain things because you spend yourself in an environment which is bad for you? Just as somebody I knew who was an alcoholic, and Alcoholics Anonymous have that saying, if you're going to slip up, don't go where it's slippery. So, and those who are thinking about eating a good diet, you know, your willpower, you buy it at the supermarket. That's where you make decisions, what you have in the house and what you don't, which will help you feed the good wolf and not the bad wolf. So that's one of the metaphors. The other metaphor, which I quite like, I think came from Martin Luther King, And he talked about the battle for the soul, a north-south battle for the soul, the good versus evil. And you've got this constant battle going on inside you, day in, day out. And this is where your willpower is really important. How do you behave with ethics and morals and values and integrity? How are you an inspiring leader that people can trust, who creates psychological safety, where people willingly work for you? Leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. And they'll only want to do it if they trust you. Because if they don't trust you, they'll transact with you, but you'll not have a relationship with them, which will last and will be sustainable. So I'm going to bring out 3 areas. I'm going to talk about Roger Steare, who's done a video series for us. I'm going to talk about Stoic philosophy, which has been very influential for me and many of the people who I coach and advise. I'm going to talk about religious teachings, and I'm going to talk about Stephen Covey. So firstly, let's talk about Roger Steare. Professor Roger Steare, a visiting professor at Cass Business School like myself. Roger's called himself and styled himself as the corporate philosopher. He's interested in philosophy for the modern day in the workplace. And he, in the research that he's done, has distilled ethics and ethicability. He's written 2 books. Ethicability is one of them. And his more modern book is Thinking Outside the Inbox. And he looked into the whole purpose of ethics and integrity. In simple terms, divided it into people, which was what we call love and care, values that you hold dear, and the rules for how society is run. So people, values, and rules. That's the sort of the ethics of people, or values or rules, and the balance between them. And what's so very interesting is the emphasis we give between those 3 different ethics at home and at work are quite different. So how are you behaving? If you're interested in those aspects and finding out more about yourself, Roger provides a free online survey called Moral DNA, and go to Roger Steare's website and take the test to find out about yourself. Then I found the other thing which is very helpful for a value set in times of trouble. And when you're in a difficult time, as many people are at the moment, you need something to underpin the whole way you approach your life, your work, because it's very easy for it all to crumble unless there's some value set, some integrity. I think it was the old rogue Oscar Wilde who said, a gentleman and a lady is somebody who knows what they will do and what they won't do. So what will you do and what won't you do? And do people know about your irreproachability, which is a test in one of the psychometrics that Lee and I use, called the IDI, the Individual Directions Inventory. What is your irreproachability? Do you have a clear set of values and principles and integrity that you'll stick by and that people consistently know you follow? Or do you blow with the wind, depending on the situation you're in, that you almost could call it situational leadership? In this situation, you'll behave this way, and in this situation, you'll behave in quite a different way. How will that affect your trust, your standing, your reputation, and people's belief in you? How much psychological safety does that create, where people feel they can be appropriately vulnerable, they can open up, they can share, they can have the ability to think of new ideas and innovate and be creative? But when it's not safe, people hunker down, they do the bare minimum. You get transactional management rather than relational leadership, where people will give their all for the organization because they know in that contract, that covenant, the military talked about, the military covenant, that in the military, they would give their lives for the country, but in return, the country, in the British case, would actually look after people, servicemen and officers, when they'd lost limbs and they'd perhaps been blinded or had mental health issues. They'd look after them in return. And when that's not kept, when that covenant between 2 sides is imbalanced, it's asymmetrical, then there's not that psychological safety. It's not fair. People feel fairness very keenly. Indeed, I love the work of Dr. David Rock on neuroscience, and he uses a simple model about how to create trust and safety with people. And he uses the mnemonic SCARF, SCARF. Status, do you lift their status and have the humility to drop yours? Roger Steare talks about the 3 hums of people with integrity. They have humanity, humility, and a sense of humor. We need to have a good sense of humor. Don't take yourself too seriously. I know over the years, I've at times taken myself too seriously. It's never paid off. A little bit of light humor, laughing at yourself, not laughing at other people. Laugh with them about a situation, but to laugh at them is to humiliate them. And that doesn't create psychological safety. They feel bitter and they may look at striking back at you. So the 3 hums, but let's go back to David Rock. SCARF, status, lift the other person's status and drop yours by dragging up a chair or getting them to talk about themselves or sharing their life story. C, certainty. We're in a time of great uncertainty. So give as much certainty as you can, and that will create more trust, more psychological safety. Autonomy. Allow them to make their own decisions, empower them. Relatedness. Are they feeling that you're a friend or you're a foe, and they're wary of you and they're mistrustful and they're waiting to get stung like a scorpion? And the story of the scorpion that was offering to give a frog a lift across a fast-flowing river, and the scorpion, it was the other way around. The frog was going to give the scorpion carry it across this fast-flowing river, and the frog said to the scorpion, "Well, why would I give you a lift?" And the scorpion said, "No, please help me." But he said, "But you'll sting me and I'll die." No, I won't. Okay, trust me, I won't. So the frog is doing frog stroke across the river. And sure enough, the scorpion and stung the frog, and the frog was drowning and the scorpion was drowning with it. And the frog said, "What are you doing? You're killing us both. Why did you do it? I said I trusted you. You messed up. You trusted me. And I just can't help myself. It's in my nature." Hopefully it's not in yours. You have choice. You're always at choice. Remember, you have that. Every day you start afresh. How are you going to behave? What integrity, what values are you going to live by? And remember, it's almost like moral courage. It's something you can top up and it drains down by the end of the day. So don't put yourself in situations where your moral integrity and your values will be challenged and be at question when you're at your lowest ebb, because you may give up. Just like going into the fridge when there's the wrong kind of stuff there, when you should be eating healthily and you're just tired at the end of the day and you drop down to the lowest common denominator. It's the same with moral quotient. You can easily give up at it. And it's a bit like a bad word said against someone. When you badmouth someone to them or you give them both barrels, it can't be unsaid. It's been done. So really check in with yourself and find situations to step out and not get caught up where you might be in bad situations where you behave with a lack of moral integrity. Always imagine, even if you're on your own, imagine all the people you knew being with you, watching what you're doing. Would they be proud of you? Would you not want to act in a way that they would if they could see you? So you're not really alone. In your mind, you're always conscious there is people with you, your support team of heroes and heroines, people who you'd want to live up to. So a bit about Roger. Read up his materials, very good. The next thing I want to talk about, my favorite topic, is Stoic philosophy. And as I've gone through some dark moments over the last few years, I found Stoical philosophy incredibly helpful. I particularly like an author called Ryan Holiday. Ryan's done a number of books. I've read about 4 of his. My favorite is The Daily Stoic. And I have that in a Kindle app as well as on a book beside the bed. And every morning, I'm not reading the news, which gets us down and depresses us. I'm picking up the phone and I'm going straight to the Kindle, that little saying for the day, which comes from Epictetus, Seneca, Emperor Marcus Aurelius from 2,000 years ago. And their wisdom and their integrity and their values are still highly relevant for today. So the Daily Stoic is a good one, which I find very helpful. Lives of the Stoic is a later book he's done, and he talks about the different Stoics and their philosophy and the values they bring about integrity and about your moral conscience and the logic you have to do the right thing. He also wrote a book called The Obstacle is the Way, which I found very good, that in the obstacle that you're faced with is the way of the future. Just think, when you think you're being blocked or you've got a hardship or something's knocked you down, there's some learning in it. Everything that happens to you teaches you something if only you're prepared to listen. Everybody you meet has something to teach you if only you would listen. The other book is The Ego is the Enemy. And boy, the ego is the enemy. When we get so full of ourselves, when we forget to be humble and have a bit of humanity, when we think we really are somebody special and we forget that we're just a normal person, an ordinary person trying to achieve extraordinary things in the work that we do as leaders day in, day out. So those are good. The Daily Stoic, The Lives of Stoics, Obstacle is the Way, and Ego is the Enemy. The other book on the Stoics, which I found very good, was by Donald Robertson, is How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. And it's about Marcus Aurelius. And Meditations is another book, the translation of Marcus Aurelius and his daily sayings. That he wrote a journal each day in the middle of a war. 19 years he was stuck in the forests of what is now modern day Hungary and southern Germany, fighting the Huns, protecting Rome against them. And he had his doubts, and he knew each day he'd meet people who he didn't particularly like, but he had to find a way of working with them, or he would be tempted by things he shouldn't be doing. And how did he keep coming back and holding himself accountable and behaving with virtue? Virtue was a very important concept to the Stoics, and it still is today. Many people adopt those Stoical philosophies, which isn't about being hard and resilient and living in a sort of hair shirt life. It's just about letting life not get you down. The concept is that control the controllables. You can control your thoughts and you can control your actions. I can't control your thoughts and your actions. I can influence you, but only by the way that I behave. So people watch what you do. Rarely do they just follow what you say. That's what some incredulous politicians tend to do. Fine words, but their actions are very different. Now, we will all make mistakes over time, but if we're prepared to learn from them, pick ourselves up, resolve them, apologize, genuinely sort them out, not in a shallow way, but that we really are going to mend our ways and sort things out. Another good book, and this sort of takes you into other concepts, ways of life, is a lovely book by Dr. Wayne Dyer, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And he talks about Lao Tzu, who was 2,500 years ago, and just the wisdom and the way of handling the world and the principles and the values of the way that you treat other people. Very useful. Confucius at that time, also some wisdom. And many of the great religions of the world teach this element of MQ, of moral integrity, as you see there at the top. And have you got a true north? Is your compass pointing true north, or is it magnetic north? And magnetic north moves a very small amount each year, 7 mils out of 6,400 mils, which is a more granular version of a compass rather than just 360 degrees. But it's moving bit by bit. And some people's integrity and values change bit by bit, get tempted by greed and money and guilt and bad behavior, rather than sticking to behaving a way that you'd feel proud of, and that your family and your friends and your work colleagues would be proud of how you behave. So a lot of the faith-based ways of life give really good guidance on MQ, and particularly Christianity, which has been the one I've been brought up with, both the Quakers and Church of England. But whatever your particular faith, there is some gems in there which will keep us firm, keep our feet grounded solidly in a world of temptation and being led astray and losing people's trust. And so if I take perhaps a Christian based approach with Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey wrote a seminal book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's probably one of the first self-help books that I read some 20 years ago, and I found it incredibly helpful. And he talks about the character ethic, that people often look about the superficiality, but what's a person's character like? And do you hire for character and attitude? People often look for knowledge, skills, and attitude. Knowledge and skills can be developed, but attitude, if someone's attitude and character is wrong, it's very difficult to change that. Stephen Covey Jr., the son, wrote a great book called The Speed of Trust. And in it, there is one equation which will serve you well. Trust equals speed times cost. So if trust is high between you and your work colleagues, or you and family members or people in your life, if trust is high, then the speed of interaction between you and them is high, and the cost of the interaction is very low. But take a worst case situation where a couple has fallen apart and get divorced. The speed of interaction between them is very slow, with lots of letters, lawyers. The cost of it is enormous, and the fees that they each have to pay. So trust equals speed times cost. Let's just go as a final piece of this session on MQ, moral quotient, integrity, values, ethics, character. Let's look at Covey's model, which is a really useful one for you to tap into. It was about being effective, but also it's about having a value set, a moral code in the way that you approach things. He talked about moving from dependence to independence to interdependence, the way you depend on others. And in the 7 habits, he talked about habit 1 to 3 being a private victory, and habits 4 to 6 being a public victory, with around the outside of the model, habit 7, which is sharpen the saw. And I'll come back onto that at the end. But firstly, in his habit 1, he talks about be proactive. And some of you come across, if you haven't, the 4-box model, quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. Quadrant 1, it's urgent and it's important, things that you've got to do in your life. Quadrant 2 is not urgent, but it is important. That's the proactive quadrant. Be proactive. Quadrant 3, it's urgent, but it's not important. And quadrant 4 is neither urgent nor important. So how do you spend your time in those different areas? So habit 1, be proactive. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. So begin with where you want to be, your end state, and work backwards. Have a plan working backwards from that. Begin with the end in mind. Habit 3 is put first things first. The things that matter most should not be at the expense of the things that matter least. So think about what matters most in your life, your relationships. When I went to the oncology department, the cancer ward, when a member of our family was seriously ill with cancer, I met 3 people who were dying, an 18-year-old, someone in their 40s, and someone who was in their 70s. And I asked them, I said, when I'm talking to people and I say to them what really matters, what would you say what really matters as you look back on your life in this, you frankly told us you're in the final weeks of your life. And they said, it's all about relationships. It's all about trusted relationships, which comes back to your values and in your integrity. It's not about the work and the things and the stuff. They couldn't take it with them, but it is about trusted relationships with people who love and care about them, which comes back to Roger and the ethics of people, values, and rules. And the people do matter at the end of the game. The love, the care, the nurturing that you get. So first things first, habit 3. Then you move in the dependence to interdependence to habit 4. Think win-win. So most people try and they're competitive and they're comparative. But if you're too competitive, where you're just trying to win at all expense, you have a scarcity mentality rather than an abundance mentality. You think that if they do well, I do badly. If I do well, they'll do badly. And think of it as almost as a seesaw. It's either or. No, if you can win and they can win, or even the triple win, where the individual wins, the team wins, and the organization wins, that is always going to end up in a more public victory. Habit 5, seek first to understand and then to be seek first to understand and then to be understood. When you're in an argument with somebody else, often you try and speak over them if you make a mistake like I do. And I've learned from habit 5, seek first to understand and then to be understood. I say, let me understand your point of view first. I'll listen to you, I won't interrupt, and then I'll summarize what I've understood and make sure it's to your satisfaction that you agree I've understood you. When you're happy I've done that, let me then explain my point of view and you summarize it to my satisfaction. It's rare that you can't get a resolution if you seek first to understand and then to be understood. And habit 6 is synergize, this idea of we're all connected. We're like a human body, the world, that everybody's a different limb, a different part, a different cell, but we need the whole lot. We cannot live on our own. It's the synergy of the sum is greater than the sum of the whole is greater than the parts. You need the whole thing together. And habit 7 is sharpen the saw. And the story goes that you're walking through a forest, you see someone's covered, soaked in sweat on a hot day with this saw, and they're trying to get through a huge tree. And you're saying, what are you doing? They say, well, can't you see, stupid? I'm trying to saw this tree down. And you say, well, why don't you stop for a minute and sharpen the saw? To which they reply, don't be stupid. I haven't got time to do that. I'm too busy sawing down the tree. If you only took time out for a moment to recover and discover and renew and look after yourself, your health, your well-being, eat, move, sleep, breathe, focus, prosper, looking after yourself and others, then you'll be in a better form to deal with the situation. And once again, your energy levels will not be so low that you make bad moral judgments, poor integrity, because you're tired and you're exhausted. So keep the energy levels up and you will not be undermined. You won't be doing things which will erode your trust, your credibility, and your ability to be an inspiring leader. So that is just a canter through some of the books, some of the areas that we have found very useful about you developing the first of the 8 principles of what makes highly effective, inspiring leaders who are performing to a high level and have great potential. I wish you every success.